Okay, so this is the 5th video lecture in the chapter on memory. I had previously recorded it and realized you couldn't watch what I was doing, so I am re-recording it. In this video lecture, and I'm hoping I don't leave anything out, I want to talk about imperfect memory and a couple theories about how theories about retrieval. And so there's the first theory, and this helps us understand why so many of our memories are incorrect, right? So one theory is based on this idea of a schema model, and I'm going to explain that in a bit more detail, or actually show you a little video as a demonstration. And this model says that memories are, that in our head we have these shortcuts for information. They're ways that we consolidate information. And when, sort of like what I was talking about in some previous lectures, and when new information bumps up against old information, or you can anchor it to something. Remember, that was what elaboration rehearsal was about, is that if you can, it's easier to remember things when it attaches to something else. This idea gets used a lot in like educational theory and educational and learning theory, that says that that one thing that we can do as teachers to promote learning is we can anchor that. We can give some framework, if you will, to hold on to new information. I want to show you, or hopefully I can show you, a little video that illustrates what I mean by this. That simply being told what you're going to be told sets a framework, and you'll remember what you're told better if you know what you're going to be told, right? So thinking about your speech class and tell me what you're going to tell me, and then tell me what you told me, right? But that's when we talk about that in terms of memory, anyway, so we call that the schema model. So I'm going to try something here. I am going to stop sharing my screen, and then I'm going to share a different screen with you. And you're going to have to look at the side of my face for a minute while I turn on, oh, and I have to do one more thing here. I have to share my computer sound, and now.
Most of the factors that predict whether or not something that is being perceived will also be remembered operate in the first few seconds of learning. One of these factors involves something termed a schema, and whether or not the new learning bumps into one. Let me show you an example of a schema by having Dr. Whitehead and myself read a paragraph to you, one actually taken from a famous research paper. Your job is to remember as many facts about the paragraph as you can. Let me tell you in advance that you are going to fail miserably at this task unless I do something first. I can instantly improve your memory score from between 50 to 100% simply by adding 7 little words before you hear Dr. Whitehead and myself. But I'm not going to do that. You will hear the paragraph first, then I will read you the words.
The procedure is actually quite simple. First, you arrange things into different groups. Of course, one pile may be sufficient depending on how much there is to do.
If you have to go somewhere else due to lack of facilities, that is the next step. Otherwise, you are pretty well set. It is important not to overdo things. That is, it is better to do too few things at once than too many.
In the short run, this might not seem important, but complications can easily arise. A mistake can be expensive as well.
After the procedure is completed, one arranges the materials into different groups again. Then they can be put into their appropriate places.
Eventually, they'll be used once more in the whole cycle or have to be reheated. However, that is a part of life.
Did you get all that? No? Let us give you now the 7 magic little words. This paragraph is all about washing clothes. What that sentence provides for you is a mental framework, a way of organizing thoughts around some aspect of the world. We call such frameworks schemas, and you have them about people, situations, objects. This means something profound. Prior knowledge can disturbingly shape how you memorize and retain for long-term storage future knowledge. If a schema is triggered near the moment of learning, that learning is more permanent.
Brainers!
Well, I hope that made some sense, what they're trying to illustrate there, this idea of schemas, that that's how our memory works too, is our memory consolidates things. And so you're going to remember stuff better when it is bumps up against one of these other schemas. There's a couple other theories, and let me screen share that too. Another theory, which is called Constructivist Theory. This one's kind of a cool theory. What Constructivist Theory argues is that our memories are not like there and they're not like floating around, but rather every time we're asked to recall something, we actively put them together. This theory sort of works if you want to think about what makes a good liar versus a bad liar. You know, the idea is that when I tell a lie, when I tell something that's not true, it requires more cognitive energy, more effort, more intellectual effort, because I'm having to construct something that's not true. But when my mother asks me, you know, what did you do when you were at Sally's house? And I really was at Sally's house. Then when I reconstruct, I remember, I think back to what did I do at Sally's house? Let's see, that was last weekend. The weather was nice. It's easier to construct, if you will, that story. But if I tell my mother I was at Sally's house and I was really at the lake with John, then I have to think, oh, wait, what would that have been like? And it's in this effort that we use, this cognitive effort to reconstruct the story. And that's where people claim that they can tell if we're lying. It's not because, you know, the whole idea that you look one direction and you're telling the truth, or you look another direction and you're not telling the truth. That's really not what it's about. What it's about is people know you well enough that they know your quote unquote tells, that when you tell the truth, you don't have to think as hard to tell the truth. But when you're telling when you're telling a falsehood, you have to think about it. It's harder to reconstruct that story. You use more cognitive energy. You might close your eyes. You might look away because you're imagining something that didn't really happen. Right, and that's sort of look, this is why we lie poorly. That means it's supposed to be lie poorly, right? Because when we're lying, we're reconstructing something that didn't happen. When we're telling the truth, we're reconstructing something that does happen. A couple other things here, a couple other concepts. You got something called source confusion, and that is when we recall something from memory, but we forget where we got it. A good example of, in my personal life, of source confusion was, I remember telling I'd had a dream that my husband's boss had cancer and was like, you know, dying, was very sick. And I told my mother this story, and my mother tells my husband, oh, I'm so sorry to hear about your boss. But my husband's like, what are you talking about? I had my sources confused, but I really believed, you know, I've had students write that on discussion posts about how, like, have you ever had a dream that you thought was real and you go into your day acting as if it's real? And see, this makes sense because your dreams are part of your memory, right? Or maybe you think you saw it in a text, or I don't know, maybe you saw it on the news and you actually saw it on The Simpsons or something like this, but where we get those things confused. False memories, there's a great research project that was done on false memories, and it was about being lost in the mall. So if you go back to the beginning of the chapter, and we were talking about how you increase the odds that you're going to remember something, right? You make them vivid, you tell them about yourself, right? This elaboration rehearsal. And using those same concepts and principles, you can plant false memories, and you can distort or plant false memories. This is an experiment where they took some small children who had never been lost in the mall, right? And they told them a story. And they told them a very vivid, detailed story about themselves and about how they had been lost in the mall and what they were wearing and how they were feeling and who they got to help them and what that person was like when they helped them. Gave them all of these very specific, elaborated on the story they told them, put themselves in the story, and then a period of time later, they asked them if they had been lost in the mall. And these children believed they had been lost in the mall, even though they hadn't. But it goes to show sort of what I think I've said in another slide, or in another video, is that when we claim to remember something, we're not necessarily remembering something that's true. we have a memory of it in our head. So these children weren't really remembering that they'd been lost in the mall. They were recalling a memory that they had of being lost in the mall, right? This is also why some courts don't allow eyewitnesses or don't give a whole lot of credit to eyewitnesses, because it is so easy to distort someone's memories simply by leading questions. And this slide, that's what this slide is about, is misinformation effect. That if I give you the wrong information, I can increase the chances that you will recall, quote unquote, recall something that didn't happen. You maybe have heard the phrase leading questions, right? And in this experiment, they used a car accident, and they demonstrated that if they ask the question using different language, people would report seeing different things. So in this one, the leading question was, how fast were the cars going when they smashed into each other? What did you see, right? Did you see glass? How damaged were the cars? And when they used the language of smashed, people reported more damage. They reported glass and that the vehicles were more damaged. But when they used the language of how fast were the cars going when they tapped into each other, there wasn't glass and they weren't as damaged. So this is also related to this idea of schema. You think smashed cars, right? Smashed cars includes glass and broken vehicle parts. You think tapped and it's just a little scratch, right? Because that's what your schema has. That's your schema of cars crashing. So this is going to wrap up this lecture, and I hope this one worked better than the last time I tried.